Welcome to All Grown Up Now, Tales of a Checkered Past. I'm kennethdking, podcasting from my studio near Union Square in New York City. This podcast is an evolution of the tale, All Grown Up Now, A Friendship in 3 Acts. This is Season 2, and it's called Tales of a Checkered Past. It's a collection of short stories from my salad days on up to the present. In each podcast, another self-contained story will be presented. These podcasts will be broadcast bi-weekly, so you get 2 a month. Enjoy. I call episode 80, The Week That Was 1982. Today I saw a post on Instagram from a man who alleged that a famous Broadway costume designer here in New York had sexually assaulted him when he was a young man. He alleged that this wasn't a one-off, but a pattern. The man in question seems to have had a reputation, which started me to thinking back on a time I always referred to as the week that was 1982. Now, a little history is in order here. I moved from Oklahoma City to San Francisco in August of 1981. In July of 81, I went to visit my friend Mark in San Francisco. While I was there, I interviewed for a job to be his assistant in window display for a chain of stores called Roos Brothers. The job would have a fancy title, Assistant Director of Visual Merchandising for all 10 stores. Every day for the next 2 weeks after I returned home, I made it my job to call and pester Bob Voppen, the man I interviewed with, to give me the job. On the 15th time, I think, he shouted, "All right, I give in, you're hired." "When do you want me here?" I asked. "Call me tomorrow. I'm sure you've gotten into the habit already, so it won't be any problem." "Done," I said. When I spoke to Bob the next morning, he told me he needed me in 10 days. "Will you pay for my move?" I asked. My boss at Dillard's had told me I could ask for that. I didn't know that. There was a heavy sigh, and he said, "Yeah, geez, anything. Just get here, okay?" "See you in 10 days, I said. After work, I excitedly went over to Miss Ann's house to tell her the good news. My sister Kathy was there as well. Miss Ann, of course, was her usual encouraging self when I delivered the news. "You can't make it in California," she screeched. "You stupid kid, you gave up a good job here to do what? To run off to California. You'll never amount to anything." "Excuse me," I said. "I have to go home and pack." I snatched my car keys off the kitchen counter and stormed out, Kathy following in my wake. Moving to San Francisco was a big challenge to me. First, the cost of living. I was used to paying $100 a month for a small apartment and therefore had lots of discretionary income to spend on good living, cool clothes, and dining out at restaurants. But my rent for the place in Noe Valley was triple that, even though the salary I had agreed to wasn't triple what I was making in Oklahoma City. The consolation for the tiny salary was that I had a fancy title, Assistant Director of Visual Merchandising. Ooh. Finances aside, I went forth to make my way to San Francisco despite the budget and inexperience. My assets, besides some ambition, were that I was young, kinda cute, I had good clothes, I knew which fork to use, and I could make conversation. This I had learned from hanging around the posh restaurant and bar in Oklahoma City. I call it the Barbara Walters technique. It consisted of me asking questions, looking fascinated, then asking more questions. Works every time. Also, I don't drink alcohol, which saved me so much money over the years. So, one of my inexpensive amusements was to dress up, go out to fancy watering holes, sip a club soda, look good, and chat up the people around me. More on that later. Those first months were exciting, but at the same time nerve-wracking. I found an apartment about a month after I moved there, and Mark loaned me a bed. But it took until January for Roos Brothers to move my furniture, so, for a time, I just had a bed, a few dishes, and the clothes that I was able to pack into the back of my aging Toyota. Adding to the adjustments one needs to make when getting used to a new city, there was the challenge of working this new job. This was a chain of 10 stores throughout the Bay Area. It was only after I had been working there for a few weeks that I heard the word undercapitalized. That was about the time I personally experienced undercapitalization. Since my car was used for all the commuting to the different stores, it was the one that received all the wear and tear. That manifested itself in the early fall by requiring new ball joints on the front end. I remember the cost of this. It was $110. It was over a third of my rent. To get the money, I went down to Mission Street and pawned my jewelry. 3 valuable rings fetched the money. I understood that I needed to round up the money to get them out of Hawk before I went to visit OKC for Christmas. Miss Ann would surely notice if they were missing, and she would start asking questions. So for a time, I was distracted about the undercapitalization of Roos Brothers. It was only a matter of time before they started closing stores and getting rid of people. First to go was Dave, the old trimmer who taught me so much. Dave hated the phrase visual merchandising. "We're trimmers, that's what we are," Dave would always insist as we worked together. He was let go because he was, as Mark told everyone else, old-fashioned. I kept my mouth shut. I needed the job. Another casualty of this undercapitalization turned out to be Mark. In February, Mark called me outside one day while we were working in the Stonestown store. "Ken, I'm leaving. They're abolishing the visual merchandising director position and wanted to make me a trimmer and fire you, but I volunteered to go. So you'll have a job and a little raise that I talked them into giving you, but you won't be visual merchandising director." I, of course, expressed my shock and sadness about this turn of events, but also suspected there was more to the story, especially the part about abolishing Mark's position. There was a moment when I considered quitting in solidarity, but I thought better of it. Mark had a husband to help out financially. I didn't. The next day, I asked Bob, the guy I pestered for this job, out for coffee. We went to the little cafeteria across the mall. "I brought you out here because the walls have ears," I said. "I understand that you could fire Mark and keep me cheaper than you could fire me, even with the little raise you gave me. It was a hunch I had." "Yeah," he said. "Well, I'll take the small raise, but I also want one other thing. Mark told me you had abolished the position of Director of Visual Merchandising. I want a letter on company letterhead sent to all the stores and a copy for myself for my portfolio saying that I have been promoted to Director of Visual Merchandising. Now, I know I'm just a glorified trimmer, but I have to think of my resume. This has to look like a step up. This will make up for the difference between the raise and what Mark was making." "Done," Bob said. So at the end of the day, I had my letter, and it's in my portfolio even today. That evening, I came home to discover that my apartment had flooded. I was on the top floor, but the water hadn't leaked down from the roof. Rather, it rose up through the carpet. That winter had been unusually rainy, and my skylight in the bathroom leaked even if there was a drizzle. Happily, though, it leaked right into the bathroom sink. So, while my landlord was enthusiastically cheap with repairs, I didn't worry too much. But this was different. I spent the rest of the evening dragging all the furniture over to the other side of the room. The leak seemed to be along the outer walls of the building, and the center of the room was dry. Repeated calls to my landlord yielded absolutely nothing. It was on my birthday, in the middle of February, that I saw the toadstools.
No way.
Yes, toadstools growing up through the pile of the carpet. Miss Ann called to wish me happy birthday and asked what I was doing for the big day. I replied casually, "Oh, I'm just watching the toadstools growing up through the carpet." There was silence. The landlord eventually dried out the carpet and reinstalled it, but the place always smelled musty after that. In March, the financial situation at Roos Brothers became more dire. They closed more stores and brought in a man who was referred to as the Undertaker. In other words, they wanted to pick this corpse clean and wring out every penny they could before they had to shut it down. This guy brought in cheaper merchandise, marked it way up. I believe there was a legal number of days that merchandise had to be offered for sale at a certain price before they could mark it down. The moment that time expired, the prices were slashed, but most people weren't fooled. I was still needing to display the windows, and my aim was to make as many interesting displays as I could to fill out my portfolio. I understood that this job wasn't going to last forever, so I needed to show current work when I finally got an interview. My aim was to try to get on at Macy's. That was where all the ambitious display queens wanted to work. And this was where my inexpensive amusement, dressing up, going to a posh watering hole, and chatting people up, became what later was known as networking. One of the places I was told to hang out was a place called Sutter's Mill. It was a bar in the financial district with the 49ers Gold Rush decor. All of the big money queens went there after work. I was told that one could meet the head of visual merchandising for Macy's there. His name was Bob Williams. So one evening I left work early, went home, spiffed myself up, and headed downtown. Okay, first a picture of this man, Bob Williams. Bob Williams was an overly grand queen who wore Armani jackets, thinning, red-dyed, overly permed hair that looked like pubic hair, and leather trousers that sounded like a hefty bag when he walked across the room. This was due to his deflated ass, flattened, no doubt, by sitting on it for years without doing a stitch of work. Auntie Bob, as we later called him when I worked at Macy's, was known for the casting couch routine. The display queens who worked downtown were drawn from the ranks of the casting couch. At Sutter's Mill that evening, I introduced myself, and Auntie Bob politely chatted with me. But then a swarm of big, hunky muscle queens pushed me aside, smiled, batted their eyelashes, and proceeded to pay him court. I tried going to Sutter's Mill a few more times, but to no avail, as it was not my crowd. So I was knocked out of the game. Later, when I actually got an interview with Auntie Bob, he had no memory of ever meeting me. My favorite watering hole was a place called the Cafe San Marcos. It was on Market Street near Castro. Upstairs and upscale. I think that may even have been in their marketing, but it was really shishi. To set the scene, smoke glass mirror on the walls, stainless steel and brass floor, bar stools of clear lucite and tan leather, lots of pin spots and bird of paradise flower arrangements, club chairs covered in taupe ultra suede, disco on the sound system. This was 1982. It was a fun crowd, and if someone, namely me, looked particularly fetching, I could expect a lively conversation, courtesy of my Barbara Walters interview technique. I knew not to stay too late, as the other boys got progressively more drunk and less intelligible as the evening wore on. It was at the Café San Marcos that I met the Buddha. First off, I remember my outfit. I was wearing an emerald green pleat front shirt that I had made, with a vintage black chalk stripe jacket with skinny lapels from the early 60s, Levi 501s, one of my vintage skinny neckties, and my favorite pair of Pierre Cardin shoes, the ones I paid a week's salary for. The Buddha was sitting next to me at the bar. I call him that for two reasons. The first, he was built like a Buddha, no judgment, just fact. Second, I heard later that the other guys called him that. It was his nickname. We were seated on the acrylic bar stools, and I was doing my usual interview. But I lost track of the conversation for a moment and suddenly found myself being interviewed. As the job situation was looking more dire, I was a little preoccupied with that. The Buddha seized on this snippet of information and started asking more questions. So, naive as I was, I outlined the situation. I worked in display. My job eventually would end. I was hoping to work for Macy's, but didn't really know anyone that I felt I could ask to get an interview. The Buddha didn't say much. He just listened. When it was time to leave, as I said, I didn't stay too late, he asked me if I could give him my phone number and a lift home. I, of course, obliged. He lived up the hill on Castro, north of Market Street, in a flat in a Victorian. When I stopped in front of his place, we chatted in the car. Finally, he said, "I know Bob Williams at Macy's." "Really?" I said. "Yes." "I see," I said. "I could make a call for you." And his voice trailed off. "You could? That'd be great," I said. And then I felt a hand on my upper thigh. "Oh. Come for dinner on Saturday evening and we'll talk about it," he said. "I'll call you." And then he held up the paper with my phone number on it. As I sat there, the car idling, he opened the door, looked over, and leered. "I'll call you. Saturday evening. Dinner." For the next few days, I was jumpy. What would I do? Now, I was rather easy and casual sex wasn't a problem, but I wanted to choose with whom and when. I was no doubt pondering this that Thursday when my car got hit from behind by a man in his 3-ton Oldsmobile. It happened as I was coming back from the Roos Brothers store in Marin, stopped at a light on Park Presidio. My car got totally creamed in the back end. Now, this is the one and only time my new work title came in handy. We both got out of our cars, and I walked back to survey the damage. I also asked the guy for his ID, which he really didn't want to give me. "Hey man, you're making me late for work," he shouted. "Give me your driver's license, and I'll move on," I said evenly. Talking evenly was a challenge because this guy was a foot taller than me and outweighed me by 200 pounds. I could well imagine him breaking me in half. I had no choice but just brazen it out. "No, man, I won't," he shouted. "Okay, then," I said. "I'm calling the police." "No, man, don't do that," he pleaded. "You're making me late for work." "Listen," I said, pulling myself up to my full 5'5". "I'm the director of visual merchandising for the entire chain of Roos Brothers stores. I'm late for a very important meeting because you hit my car. Now, I'm going to take as much time as I need, and I'll call the police if I feel I need to. At that point, I headed for the payphone across the street, hoping my knees didn't look as unsteady as they felt. While I was on the phone with the police, who were not helpful as I wasn't injured yet, the guy came forth with his ID. Seeing how much damage there was, I was afraid they were going to total the car because it was so old. Yet another worry piled onto the uncertainty that was my life. Uncertain job, and now uncertain that I could keep my car. As I drove away, it started to pour rain. That evening, I got home to find a package had arrived from Grandma. A few weeks back, she had said she was cleaning out her basement and asked me if there was anything down there that I wanted. There was. It was a lamp. Grandma said that Grandpa had given it to her in the early 30s. It's hard to describe, but enchanting. It consisted of a bronze base about 10 inches across. Sitting atop this base was a frosted mint green glass shade, about 12 inches high, with a bronze fitting at the top. The glass shade was a dome of sorts, but it wasn't cylindrical. It had 5 ribs running the length of it. But what so enchanted me, there was a light bulb inside, and over it was a clear cylinder that had goldfish painted on it. The cylinder sat on a pin. It had fins in the top, so the heat of the bulb caused the cylinder to rotate. This cylinder projected goldfish onto the frosted green glass shade, and the projection of the goldfish onto the ribs of the shade made them appear to swim. It's a fond childhood memory of mine. So Grandma said yes, I could have it, and she would send it, and this was the package. Excitedly, I opened it, only to discover that the mint green glass shade was shattered. She hadn't packed it well enough. After the stress of the job, and now getting my car wrecked, well, seeing this, I sank down onto my knees to have a good cry. And that's when I discovered that my apartment had flooded again. To my horror, my knees sank into the water-sodden carpet. And then the phone rang. It was the Buddha. "Hey, just checking in about Saturday evening," he said. "I thought we'd have dinner, and you could spend the night, and Sunday we could go to the fashion show I was invited to at Joseph Magnin." I know a lot of people in this town," he said. "Indeed. So you'll come over at 7. "I don't know," I said. "See you then. You do want to work in this town?" "Yes." "See you Saturday at 7. All day Friday, I tried to work to distract myself. I slept fitfully that night and into Saturday. Now, it wasn't the sex. It was the idea that I had slept with someone to get ahead. I know it may sound a little puritanical from someone who was a bit of a slut, but I wanted to make my name on my hard work and abilities, not on my back. The idea that he could tank my career was scary. I had nobody to help or go to. And really, this was my chosen career. I didn't want to change careers, nor did I want to be known for sleeping my way into a job. Late Saturday morning, as I was crying my eyes out, the phone rang. I stiffened, hoping it wasn't him again. It was Miss Anne. How are you doing? She asked lightly. Fine, I managed to squeeze out. Really? Yeah, I said brightly. Why wouldn't I? There was a long silence. Move home, she said. I started to cry. You've had your fun. Move home, she said. I'll pay for the move. It'll be easier for you here. Just come home. And then I remembered it. You can't make it in California. You stupid kid. You gave up a good job here to do what? Run off in California. You'll never amount to anything. And suddenly, I found my backbone. No, I said. Why not? Because I haven't conquered San Francisco yet. That's stupid. You're so goddamn bullheaded. You just want to do what you damn well pleased. I gotta go now, I shouted back, and then I hung up. I sat there on the sofa and cried some more. Then I got up, went into the bathroom, and caught a look at myself in the mirror. What I saw wasn't pretty. What am I doing? I said to the reflection. The reflection looked back at me, puffy-eyed, waiting for the answer. And I knew the answer. And the answer was no. So that evening, I dressed up extra specially spiffy. I had on my turquoise polished cotton pleat front shirt that I had also made, my one and only Saint Laurent taupe tweed jacket, taupe pleat front trousers, and another of my skinny ties, a good belt, and my lucky Pierre Cardin shoes. At the appointed time, I showed up to the Buddha's place, and as we chatted, he urged me to have a cocktail before dinner, to relax, which I refused. Oh, come on, he said. It won't hurt to have just one. No, thanks. I'm good, I said. Ooh, so pure, he sneered. Not pure, I said. Still waters run deep, but no gin in those waters. And then I smiled sweetly. Dinner was served, and it was spectacular. Any gay man in San Francisco at the time knew how to set a table. As this was 1982, the dining room wall color was hunter green. Every au courant gay man had that color somewhere in his dwelling. For me, it was the kitchen. I don't remember what was served, only that to me it tasted like sawdust. I was able to fall back on the Barbara Walters technique to keep conversation going. The Buddha talked more about himself, even acknowledging that people called him the Buddha behind his back. Perhaps he felt he could relax because he thought this was a done deal. After dinner, when he decided it was time, he said, "Shall we go to the bedroom?" I just smiled and said, "No thanks. I need to go home and get to bed so I'll look good at that fashion show tomorrow." "This won't take long, and then you can go get some sleep," he leered. "No, I need to go now," I said, and with that, I got out my car keys. He scowled. I looked right at him. "You know I can ruin you in this town," he spat. "I know. So, I'll see you tomorrow at Joseph Magnet." And I pushed by him, ran out the door, and left. Surprisingly, we did attend that fashion show at Joseph Magnet together, but I never saw him after that. That decision ended what I called the week that was 1982. My theory was that San Francisco puts newcomers through such a week to see if they're really serious about staying. Many turn tail and run back to where they came from. I didn't want to be one of them. And life, after that, opened up for me with all sorts of new and exciting people and activities. It was as if the universe rewarded me for not giving up. Success is not only a result of hard work and some talent. Connections are also important. That's how the world works, and ideally, the connections are mutually beneficial. That's one way careers are made. In this situation, I didn't want to feel like I had slept my way up. I wanted to work my way up. Because connections are not, or shouldn't be, prostitution or assault. There's an imbalance of power, especially between older and younger, established and fledgling. Exploiting that imbalance is unfair at the least and criminal at the worst. In certain fields, there may be more of this kind of thing. The perpetrators generally get away with it because they are regarded as somehow more powerful, valuable, or talented. Certainly in window display in the 1980s in San Francisco, I heard talk of this going on quite a lot. Along with that, I'm glad I didn't drink. Some of this predatory behavior is lubricated by applications of excess alcohol and drugs. I knew several people went along with situations, their judgment impaired. Looking back, mine could have been one of those situations. Who knows what might have been in that drink that he offered me? Thinking back on the Buddha, though, I don't know for certain if he did anything to harm my prospects, as there was no hard evidence of that. But when I got the job at Macy's, it wasn't at the downtown store or even a store within a reasonable driving distance. I got stuck in Pleasanton, an hour's drive away. While I enjoyed working there with the guys, it was a long commute for not a lot of money, working for a crazy boss. I needed the job desperately, so I took it. It wasn't optimum. Not optimum, but that was the last time I had to confront that kind of situation, so I'm lucky. Maybe I got a reputation for not putting out, imagine that. To this day, though, I wonder where I might have ended up had I slept with the Buddha. Where would my career have gone? This is a question that countless men and women, especially young ones, grapple with every day. Put up with a sexual predator or leave? A hard decision, especially when it's a career one is devoted to and loves. A predator can pollute a situation, kill a career, and traumatize a life. Looking back at the week that was 1982, I'm glad for my choice. I may not have been as successful because of it. My career may have taken an entirely different path. But I do sleep well at night. Thanks for listening. You can get the audiobook All Grown Up Now on iTunes, Audible, and Amazon, or from my website, allgrownupnow.com. You can subscribe to the podcast on iTunes, SoundCloud, Stitcher, Spotify, and Google Play. If you have any questions, you can reach me through the website, allgrownupnow.com. You can follow me on Instagram at kennethdking, on Facebook at Kenneth D. King Design, or on my main website, kennethdking.com.